Okay, everyone, welcome to the first installment of how was it? Yeah, okay, here we go. We're starting off. Welcome everyone to the first installment of Autonomous Dialogs number 1. Today's topic is defragging the left. Today I have Vuk with me. We're going to speak on where forward should the left be going in the age of Donald Trump, among other things. Now, Vuk, you and I began talking a little bit about this on last week's Food for Thought. I asked you a question, and I'm going to go ahead and let you answer it again here because I thought that you really started on something very interesting because it's something that's been in my mind for 25 years now in terms of what the hell happened to the left. And my question to you is well, what the hell happened to the left? You started with your answer beginning towards the end of the 1960s. And I thought it was one of the most interesting things you said. And it's been something that's been in my mind for 25 years in terms of the same answer. So I'm going to let you take it away and tell us that answer. Well, again, what happened to the left?
Okay. Hello everyone. It's Vuk here. Well, my answer to that question generally it was a combination of state repression, ideological confusion induced by the New Left, the Frankfurt School, to some extent, and also I think the side effect of what happened in the 1950s with regards to the death of Stalin and the nature of the attacks made against him by both Khrushchev and the Soviet bureaucracy and by the West. So what we saw in the late 1960s and early 1970s was really a continuation to some extent of what happened in the 1950s, except the state repression was much more apparent. And there's also a continuation of that because of the ideological aspect of it. I blame Trotskyism.
Really?
Yeah, because I feel like I feel like I mean, if with regard to the ideological confusion, I feel like it's because people started to take on this view of Trotsky from a sympathetic perspective, not from a realistic perspective, and that's what caused a lot of people to really get lost in this maze where the solution was workers' consoles. I mean, the solution to the keys to building socialism was workers' consoles, without any real theory of it, outside of a few exceptions. And even those exceptions were half baked, like the Situationist International, for example. And and I know that you and I have an orientation towards the Situationist movement, but I criticize it greatly
Hmm. I
because it never
see.
develops a coherent enough theory. I think the closest they came to that was around the period of 1967 to 1973. I mean, to the point they were dissolved.
Well, all right. Now, I think that well, that's very interesting. Now, I know that when you started off last week and you began with state repression,
Hmm.
um, which I'm 100% on the same page with you on that.
Hmm.
Uh, I differ about the Stalinist part, but I think that you and I both know where our orientations go
Right.
in terms of leftism, and we can definitely, most 100% at a different episode, we can get a little bit deeper into that part.
Hmm.
But what I want you to do
Hmm.
is tell us a little bit more about the state repression part. A lot of people throw the word COINTELPRO a lot, but I don't
Right.
think people truly ever really read it or study it and learn about it.
Right.
to assume that that's what you mean by
Hmm.
state repression. So tell us
Right.
a little bit about that. The effects of state repression against,
The
uh,
American left, especially. I
yeah,
mean, but we're talking about the left in general because it happened more than one country.
of course.
But just for the sake of clarity, we'll focus on our country here.
Hmm.
And let us start with the extent to which it was explicit. Now, look what they did with the Black Panther Party. You know, anybody who actually read the Black Panther Party's documents from when they were established made it clear that they were on a socialist orientation. They had a socialist orientation, but because of the specific nature of it, that they were addressing the issues of black people in the United States, albeit from a socialist perspective, it opened the door to that kind like to the rather to open the door to how they were so easily repressed,
Right.
right? And it was brutal. For example, the Chicago police killed Fred Hampton Sr. in his sleep.
Yeah.
You know, they arrested people, they set them up on false charges. Let's look at, for example, Abumia Abu Jamal,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And that was in the early 1980s, but there was still that just goes to show the extent to which they were really repressing these people.
Yeah.
And even though a lot of those outside of that party and outside of the immediate outside of that group that was being repressed overtly were against it, I feel like it's because of their structure. I feel like it's because of their particular focus on just Black Americans that it opened the door to like for that to repression to really have the effect that they had. Because if they were more um, integrationists in that respect, if they were more, if I would say, if they were more class conscious in that respect, I feel like they would have been able to build enough supports. First of all, they'd probably even be called the Black Panther Party. And I also feel that they would have built enough support to withstand that level of repression, because
Mhm.
then the leadership would have regenerated itself eventually, and it would have operated underground,
Right.
or it might actually become stronger because of the repression, and that would have been because it had connections into other populations in this country rather. But there were also instances where the repression was not so overt, but also was also covert. People were blacklisted from jobs.
Hmm.
You know, people were placed in positions where they were not able to really engage in the kind of activism that was required. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, and because of what was happening with Vietnam, you know, a lot of that whole repression was bound up into anti-Vietnam War activity.
Hmm.
So it was a less. So it seemed like it was more overt when it actually was more covert, because that was used as a pretext. If you know what I'm getting at,
Yeah.
if you can see what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
All right. Well, now it's so funny because you were going into Trotskyism and you were going into uh, workers' councils, the various things that I wouldn't say I'm not. I'm certainly not a
I'm not
Trotskyist.
against. I'm not
I
against.
was a former.
No, yeah, I don't mean to interrupt you, but let me make this clear. I mean, I'm not against the concept of workers' councils. What I'm against is a lack of theory, a lack of a coherent theory around that. That's what I'm against. Like whenever you say these things, like, oh, it's always imagining some sort of seemingly unrealistic fashion.
Hmm.
And I feel like if you're going to communicate, if we're going to, if we say that what happened to the Soviet Union was wrong, and we say it's because of their organization structure, then we also have to think, well, we also have to be very clear about it on what we think can work and how we think that can work. And we have to show how realistic it is.
Well, okay.
And
Now,
that's why I'm saying, like, well, I'm just against the idea of having like just stating, let's say, just stating that we need workers' councils, for example. I want something more than that.
yes, but now during the time
Hmm.
when Lenin and Stalin
Hmm.
and all of them had returned to Russia
Hmm.
and to
I
push
think
the
Stalin was the only one who didn't leave Russia.
yeah, you are correct. I'm sorry.
Hmm.
When Lenin came back, but the point that I'm making here is that what I wanted to make is that the workers' councils were in action. They were trying to be established. The point here is that
Well,
your argument sounds a lot to me like when people say, "Hey, socialism doesn't work," and
I'm not
then we
saying that.
know
I'm
that.
just what
Well,
I'm
I
trying
know
to.
you're not saying socialism doesn't work. I'm saying when you say that workers' councils doesn't work, I'm comparing to when people say socialism doesn't work simply
Hmm.
because, but
Hmm.
we know that historically there have been
Hmm.
very different. There have been a variance of instances where it didn't quote unquote not work because there were different reasons for why it didn't happen. Normally,
Right.
due through hostile forces not
Right.
letting it happen. So
Right.
my point is that for something like workers' councils, even though there wasn't a great deal of theory around it, it
Hmm.
didn't mean that it couldn't work. The autonomous movement in Italy, I think, proved that it could
Hmm.
work. And I think
Hmm.
that, and I really don't want to go into just that debate. I would love it if we did, and we will have a conversation about it. My point, however,
Hmm.
and I only brought that up because I know that I was going to get on to the next subject, which is in terms of what happened to the left is the fragmentation. I think that one of the
Right.
things that I remember reading about is a very, very good book called
Hmm.
the sorry, hold on just for 1 second. It was I think it was called Out Now.
Hmm.
Just give me 1 second to confirm. Um, it was called.
Hmm. What was it?
Okay, so it was a book called Out Now, and it was a very good. It was a very good book in that what it was doing was that it talked about all of the different uh, ideological. Okay, it was talking about all the different ideological lines between these groups that, like, especially amongst the new left, or those who call themselves the new left, versus
Hmm.
say, your CPUSA groups, i.e., the people who were more oriented closer to Stalin,
Hmm.
uh, and people seem to take these political lines extremely seriously, so much so that they were fragmented. They allowed that to fragment themselves or to separate themselves, and in turn allow the state to further exploit these
Right.
differences,
Right. Right.
even to the point to where there were acts of violence. The very beginning the earlier form of the old Roushites, the LaRouchites, for instance, before Lyndon LaRouche established himself as a LaRouchite, and after he left the Socialist Workers Party, this guy was running around
Stop
upending
it. Then.
this guy
Stop it.
was
Then.
running around upending people's tables, literature tables, and things like this. My point here is that you and I obviously have some ideological differences and very
Mhm.
strong ones. But at the
Mhm.
same time, in
Mhm.
the face of the reactionary environment that we're in right now,
Mhm.
I know I would trust you far more.
Mm.
Trust a black nationalist,
Mhm.
even a liberal to some degree. I feel like what one of the other factors besides state repression was indeed the ideological uh, uh, fractioning, if you will, or differences, so much so that it made us dysfunctional. Would you
Mm.
agree that that was also a factor?
I think that was a secondary factor.
Mm.
If it wasn't for the state repression, it would have been because of the ideological differences, which would have eventually made that kind of thing a lot easier if that happened first, and if the state repression happened after that. But I feel like I agree that it is a like again like I said it was a secondary factor, and I feel like that had a lot to do with the way the old communist parties in the 1950s were affected throughout the West by the death of Stalin, by the prosperity that came right after the Second World War, and then that went right into the 1950s in most Western countries, and by the crisis of Marxism-Leninism.
Mm.
Now, some people are so stubborn, even though the Soviet Union has collapsed, even though it's pretty much obvious that Marxism-Leninism, if it had a, I shouldn't say Marxism-Leninism, if it had a real point to it, was time specific and it wasn't able to build a lasting social society. You know, they still hold on to it without regard for the evidence, without regard for why these societies reverted back to capitalism. You know, and many of the ideological differences that exist in the left today aren't so much. It's not just the same old thing with Marxism or anarchism. I think that can be converged to a certain extent as well. But I feel like the source of the ideological conflict that we've seen in the left is coming from the instability of Leninism, the antiquated value of it. I mean, the antiquated nature of it, rather, and all these different explanations to try to make it more relevant to present day conditions.
Right.
So I feel that in order for us to deal with that, in order for us to deal with that, we have to deal with the elephant in the room, and that is Leninism.
Okay. Now,
Anything like I said, like I feel like despite the actual differences that exist between Marxists and anarchists, there's a level of convergence that's there, and I believe that that is a path that needs to be pursued. In fact, I've varied on this for some time, but my general approach has been since 2007. I mean, like with me, has been to like how do we converge what's useful from Marxism, what's useful from anarchism, and what's useful from new developments in theory into a coherent new paradigm that can readily replace Leninism or that has the capacity to.
hello? Hello? Oh,
Yes, sorry.
I'm sorry. I just realized you just muted. Okay.
Mhm.
So I was just I was afraid I lost you. So okay, listen. Sorry, I hear what you're saying. Um, so you feel that the way to move forward is mainly through Leninism, right?
No, what I'm saying the way to move forward is to combat Leninism.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Is to combat it
Okay.
because that is the source of a lot of the ideological conflict that's existing within the modern day left, especially in the West.
Hmm.
Whatever happens in the third world will happen regardless. But if anything, rather, if Leninism is confronted here, it will eventually show itself in the third world. So this is where the major ideological conflict has to take place here in the first world, because that's where Leninism generated itself. I mean, even though it expressed itself in Russia, it developed from abroad. So, it, before 1917, for the most part, in exile. And so it's still a first world ideology.
Right. So
And
you're
so this is
go ahead.
so that's why we need to confront it here. Leninism needs to be confronted here in the first world.
But now, okay, you're of the mindset that the left needs to go on some major political and
I don't.
ideological.
It doesn't. It doesn't need to go like when I say combat Leninism. I really am saying that the general consensus has to be that there needs to be a set. That what I've said on multiple occasions on Twitter and in real life as well is that in order for that to really happen, in order for that to be effective, you need a center. Now, and it will probably have to be by country because we're not in the position where we can really build international organizations that can really support the leftist movement or the world socialist movements. So, like, let me come back to our country as an example. We need a center here. Now, if we had a center here that wasn't based on Leninism, that had coherent tactics, a coherent theory, and that can build mass support, then I mean, I think here alone that would ruin the whole thing for Leninism. It would draw out all that I mean all the youthful energy that is still left in it. It would draw all these young people that are in these useless small third rate parties, and then that would they would gravitate towards that center.
But do you really believe that Leninism still holds sway and
I
influence?
believe it does to a certain extent, and it is because of the organizational capacity that still exists. Just because the Soviet Union collapsed doesn't mean that these people they stopped acting, they stopped being that the day after. You know,
Right.
maybe anarchism has more prominence now because of what happened with the anti WTO movement, the late 1990s, but the anti-globalization movement rather of the late 1990s. But in terms of organization, in terms of
Yeah.
capacity, it's still within that Leninist paradigm. It's still there. That's
Well,
why.
I'm a little lost. Please define for me
Mhm.
Leninist structure, because if what you're
Well,
really trying to say is vanguardism, then I probably would understand what you're saying. Do are
yeah,
you
but
is
I mean,
what
well,
do
I
you mean
mean,
by the Leninist? What do you mean by the Leninist structure or the Leninist
no,
style or
I'm
tendency?
talking about in terms of organization. Yeah, they're like
Okay.
they're existing like they have at least something to build on because they are based on a vertical structure, right? The other
Hmm.
problem too is that a lot of the anarchist movements in this country and in other parts of the West, they're not really as coherent, in my opinion, as these parties are. And even so, even though these parties are insignificant in the big picture. If
Hmm.
you look at the big picture of things, they still have the capacity to mobilize. Even no matter how small they are, they can still do something like that. Whereas these anarchist groupings, It's always this. There are ideological disputes within anarchism as well. You have anarcho-syndicalism, anarcho-communism, that kind of thing. But it's not the same level as what we see here. And when people think of socialism, they're really thinking of these parties, these Leninist parties. So yeah, I guess you can say that what I'm trying to really drive at is that their vanguardism, their that's why I think that they have some sort of relevance in the left. It's precisely, and I think it's precisely because of their organizational pattern.
Well, all right. Now,
I hope you can
what
see
I've
what I'm doing
observed,
now.
I do now, I really do. Let me ask you this: Were you around Occupy at all?
I was going to get involved in Occupy, but when I saw what was going on there, I got turned off.
Okay. Now, was it due to the how can I put this? Was it due to
Uh,
the liberal element, the Leninist element, or the anarchist element? Because
it
I
was a
believe that
combination of
between the
the. It was
three of
a.
them, I believe that
It
between the
was a.
three of them, they were very
I,
prominent.
I think it was a combination of the anarchist elements and more so the liberal elements. And what happened
Huh.
was, I feel like the liberal element overtook the anarchist element and stunted whatever Leninist element that existed there through their use of consensus, which is why I'm like, after watching that carefully, I had to throw that out of my personal, like my own personal thing, like where I develop theory. I'm a theorist, and I kind of look at these like what can be used to really build a lasting social society, and I was considering consensus. And when I looked rather at Occupy Wall Street, and I saw how disastrous the whole thing unfolded, especially towards the end, I had to disown consensus. That's not to say that consensus decision making is inappropriate completely. I think there are situations where that is necessary, but to
Mhm.
build an entire order around that, it can't work. And also, the issue with consensus is that, especially in the case of Occupy Wall Street, like I mean, essentially how Occupy Wall Street showed it rather, was that you can't really come to a solid decision. You always have to compromise. You have to compromise here, compromise there. And what happened in practice was that the liberals used that compromising mechanic, was a compromising mechanism rather, to stunt the anarchist element, to restrict the Leninist element, and to divert the discussion that was occurring at what was it called again? Um, the name of the park.
Zuccotti. It was
Yes,
Zuccotti
the
Park.
Cosby Park. Yeah, divert the discussion that was actually taking place in that park away from making a set of demands and direct it back to the Democratic Party and their feeder parties. See,
All right. Well,
that's how I saw it. How do you see it?
well, all right. So here's the thing. Going back to hold on just for 1 second.
If I'm sounding a little, if I'm a little if I'm being all over the place to some extent, it's because I'm trying to cover all my bases.
I see what you're saying. No, 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 no. Yeah, I get that. Okay, so let's just go back. I'm gonna circle back to give you to give you my take on things. The question originally was,
Mhm.
what what happened to the left over the last 40 something 50 odd years really. I 100% agree that I 100% agree that when COINTELPRO set in, they a lot of people kind of saw for the first time that we were not living in a democracy. Mention what happened to Fred Hampton, murdered in his bed by the police, being a member of the Black Panther Party. We had Huey P. Newton, who was in and out of prison for long periods of time, going all the way up into the 80s. You had the jailing of Mumia Abu Jamal, who was a journalist, real alternative journalist who covered the Black Panther Party and was framed on charges. You had Geronimo Pratt. So the list goes on. My point is that I think some people looked and saw exactly what was happening in terms of trying to put forth change and ideas, and they realized that their government was not joking around. That if they could frame you for a crime, if they can infiltrate your organizations, make it and try to transfer the organization to be either make it so radical that it would make it a criminal organization, or so ineffective and writhe with drama that the organization would be completely ineffective. That people just said, I'm going to either do two things: drop out of activism altogether, or go into academia and try to politically educate people so that they could be the next generation of, say, the SDS or the Black Panthers or women's liberation or what have you. Or the other people would, or the other end would be like, look, I'm going to go into the nonprofit sector or the NGO sector. And I think that what happened was, hold on just for 1 second, people. All right. Anyway, so like I was saying, I think that that's what happened. People just left out of struggle, out of fear. So now, as the years went on, you still had people trying to be activists. I mean, that certainly represented the generation, as being a Gen X activist, like got politicized or whatever during the mid to late 80s, and then decided to become an activist in the late 80s and the early 90s. But the thing is that you saw that contingent was smaller and smaller. People actually doing political work in their neighborhoods or in their communities. It
Right.
just got smaller, and I think that on the other end, people were having an easier time in the academia, trying to grow some political tendency there. The problem is that what you got stuck with was actually 2, 3 generations already of people who just want to call or radical during the time that they're in college, and
Right.
then when they graduate, they just go straight into the nonprofit or the NGO sectors
Right.
and never to be seen from or heard from again. And then they
Right.
just write think pieces and things like that on the internet, and it's just a issue.
Mm.
Oh my god. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just not looking at the chat room. This I looks like I've got a couple of people to block because I thought that I could go ahead and treat them like human beings from this channel a while back, but they've decided to act like idiots.
Now, coming
So
back
I'll
to
handle
Occupy
them.
Wall Street, though, I
Huh?
mean, what do you think happened at Occupy Wall Street?
Now,
How do you?
yeah, I was just about to get on that. So what happened was, so then you had Occupy Wall Street, right? And now you've got people who obviously were showing, and I saw a reinvigorated energy, if you will, for
Mm,
some kind of form of social change.
mm,
Um, Unlike what I had seen over the years, like I said, I've been involved in a lot of different things. getting somebody off of death row, anti, police brutality
Right.
work, stuff like that. But I had never seen anything of this scale. Now, granted, I guess I was a little spoiled in that I was in
Mm.
New York City, as I still am. I,
So am I.
but
I was.
right. So being in New York City, obviously, which was the birthplace of Occupy at the time, um, it felt different. It looked different. But see, I was also involved with people who wanted to try to replicate and spread Occupy out to their different neighborhoods and areas where they
Hmm.
would try to form general assemblies. All of this
Right.
stuff had deep roots, and I immediately recognized it in anarchist
So right.
structure and in
Right.
workerist structure and an
Right.
autonomous structure. And
Right.
it needed, and I wanted to be involved in that part of the effort. In other words, I wanted to get the hell away from Zuccotti Park and be more involved in trying to create the General Assembly style or community union, if you will, in Harlem. The problem was uh, people just kind of only wanted to see the Occupy part that was attached to what we were trying to do. And because they were turned off by Occupy, they had zero interest in it.
Mm.
So, and I understood that. I took all of that as a lesson rather than a defeat. I didn't see it as a defeat. I saw it as, well, what can we do I'm around to do better? But in the meantime, that was my impression of Occupy. I didn't have a problem. The other issue that I had mainly with Occupy was the insistence that we stayed in Zuccotti Park.
Right.
It was nonsense. My wife and I were working parents. There was no way that we were going to sit around and hang out in a park.
But that's how the liberal element got into that position of control because they kept it limited to that park, and then
And well, strangely enough, so did the anarchist element. They wanted to stay in the
right,
park as well and
right,
keep it in the park, which is
but
insane.
which is why I criticize that element. Now I do have, I mean, when I started in revolutionary politics, I started as an anarchist almost 20 years ago. So it's not like I'm estranged. I'm a stranger to it. I'm more estranged from it now than oh, I reject it completely. Like some of the things, like everything it says completely, but I'm more estranged from it than an outright rejection of being an outright rejecter of it. When coming back to what happened with the park, exactly. When they kept it limited to that park, the anarchist element, no, when the anarchist element kept it limited to the park and the liberal element kept it limited to the park, what happened was that that energy that was actually in the park wasn't able to spread to the other parts of the city. It wasn't able to spread to the places where the energy could have been reinforced. And because of the consensus pattern, it drowned out any urgency for a demands, like a solid list of demands. So they just got trapped. And these working groups, they trapped that energy and they suffocated it. So when the police moved into the park, it effectively ended the movement itself, causing the movement to spread out.
Right.
So I see it as a defeat because that would have been a great opportunity to build something contrary to what existed in the American left prior. I saw it as a great opportunity to build an organization that would have eventually been able to pose a real threat to the existing order. So I have to see it as a defeat because it had potential. It had potential. It brought into like play the first time. I mean, when I was talking to people that were involved in it and people who were interested in it, I mean, I interacted with working people that were estranged from this whole thing before, but they were interested in it. Now, if this thing didn't go off the rails like it did, I feel like it would have dragged more working people into the fray. It would have given them more energy.
This problem right there. See, that's another thing that I wanted to get on next. was the other big problem with Occupy. And the reason why I guess we're talking about Occupy, because in a lot of ways, if we're going to answer the question, or talk about the question as to why the left is the way it is, what can we do to move forward, then the best thing to do is to look at the biggest weaknesses of Occupy. Because I think that on one end, I have no problem at all with and love the fact that Occupy happened as it happened, when it happened. There was a lot of lessons to be learned from there because there were a lot of mistakes that were made. However, it needed to happen, and we still need to use that form of spontaneous rebellion and occupation in order to educate people and raise political consciousness. However, the biggest mistake was it's sort of like when you have a party in one sector of a parking lot and everybody else in the parking lot are kind of doing their own thing. And the
Right.
thing is that the Occupy movement did not dare to go out and try to talk to everyday working people. I mean, it was a huge missed opportunity for people to just only be there in that park, eating pizza, hanging out, screwing, fighting,
Smoking. They had
doing.
cigarettes on the table, Lucy's on the table.
Yeah,
This is kind of crap I'm talking about.
but right, but doing all that stuff, and then at one point, not go out in squadrons or groups and saying, "Hey, it's rush hour. Let's go to the train stations
I
and let
think
everybody
I
know
I think that goes
why
right back.
Occupy is happening." You see what
I,
I'm saying?
yeah, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think it goes right back to this consensus crap that was going on there. You had people in Occupy that wanted to do these things,
Hmm.
but the issue was the way they established the General Assembly. So you have people there who didn't want to go into the streets, who didn't want to interact with working people. They wanted to keep it to the park so they could control it and then channel that energy rather back into the Democratic Party. Remember, this is 2011. The year after that was the presidential re-election campaign for Barack Obama.
Yeah,
You see,
yeah,
that's why the liberals in Zuccotti Park wanted to keep it there. They wanted to suffocate that. And the anarchists played right into it when the actual anarchist tendency would have been to expand, expand, go out, go out. But you don't have, but the problem is you didn't have like a real nexus of information. You had these working groups, and each working group had their own ideas, and many of these ideas made no sense whatsoever.
right. Um, I agree, and then I disagree, and
Hmm.
let me explain what it is that I agree on. I agree that I'm, I agree that we just that we didn't that was a missed opportunity talking to people. I don't agree that consensus was a bad thing. It's like it's a tool. Like a hammer is ineffective if you're trying to cut cheese with it, but it's effective if you're trying to hammer a nail in. I think that it was a very interesting and new form of decision making process that in the space of my small West Harlem group worked when we made decisions and did things. We
Hmm.
conducted political forums. We tried to get people to
Stop
come out
making
to
that noise.
them. We're working on doing that stuff. It was working. But the problem, however, is that
Oh, sorry, sorry. Excuse me.
that's okay. But the problem, however, is that I guess what it comes down to is what we're not. I think it was how we tried to execute consensus, and I don't think it was ever really brought up in any of the general assemblies about doing what I just had said, which was going to the train stations and really
Hmm.
trying to talk to people and trying to bring them in. I don't think that was ever brought up. I'm pretty sure that if it were, and if people pushed for it hard enough and talked about it long enough, then maybe, just maybe, there would have been an effort for something like that to happen.
Hmm.
But I wouldn't blame it on consensus. Is my point,
Hmm.
or the use of it as to why we failed along those lines. I think that a
Hmm.
lot of that didn't happen
Hmm.
was because of what you just pointed out, because of the very elements that were there already. If the liberal element was there influencing Occupy to be out there to agitate, to remind people of the failed political policies that were mainly Republican, which was, that's their bias. But if that was the case, then they're going to do that. If this element there who just wanted to do this Occupy thing, but then I think there were genuine attempts to sort of break the geography, if you will, of the
Right.
park. I've seen that plenty of times. I've seen them do plenty of times where if they saw people getting arrested, they just simply made the effort to go in and literally physically drag people away from the police.
Right.
But unfortunately, only they were doing stuff like that
Right.
and leaving them out and actually vulnerable to be arrested themselves.
Right.
So there was all these different elements, and I'm sitting here and I'm looking and I'm going, on one end, this is great, but we're still not working together. And ultimately, my fear is that in the age of Trump, we're still going to be stuck with that. Like, we'll get together to come to demos and do things, and the anarchists are going to do their thing. The liberals are only going to want to be there to talk down or to shout down Republicans, and anyone else in between are just going to be kind of there to just be there. And then at the end of the day, changed anything. We haven't built anything. We
Hmm.
haven't moved forward.
Hmm.
That's my ultimate
Uh,
fear and worry
yeah.
right now.
But then now we're talking about some real ideological cooperation, like non-ideological based cooperation, because then we're talking about the issue that exists between Marxism and anarchism, you know, and that can be dealt with, I believe. I mean, through enough interaction. I really think that something coherent will eventually develop from that. But there has to be some sort of center, like something that really channels that energy. Because what we saw at Zuccotti Park, I mean, yes, I blame consensus for a loss of it, but I feel as if that the other reason why Occupy failed is because it never really had a driving force to it. It was just this general assembly. There was nothing of substance to it other than let the crowd decide how it would develop. I think there needs to be some sort of a guiding force there, you know. And I feel like that lack of a guiding force is very dangerous because it leads to that very same phenomenon you described. Like people go into other people's demonstrations, but everybody are at the end of the day doing their own thing. At them, they're not really getting anything done. Just demonstrations, occupations, and so on. Not getting anything done. And that's because of lack of focus. So you need something to focus all that energy, something that will lead to productive results.
Right.
So I'm not really. So I mean, do we have to call it vanguardism? Is that's the question? I don't feel like working people needs to be led by some group of political, so it's some professional revolutionaries. But at the same time, there needs to be something there that's really guiding guiding that revolutionary movement, something that's really driving it, something that makes it productive. You know, I wouldn't call it vanguardism, but I would call it, what is it? Well, let's plain leadership. I mean,
There's
adequate
nothing wrong
leadership.
with leadership. I think that one of the things that we're trying to, that I've noticed in a lot of anarchist writings right now, that um, in a lot of anarchist writings right now, is that they understand that there is a it's not so much about leadership, but authoritarian form of leadership that we
Right.
can actually navigate um, that we can actually navigate
Right.
the being able to guide people to a political understanding and a common goal rather than have to do that through an authoritarian measure or through vanguardism.
Right.
Because the problem with vanguardism, and I think I'm pretty sure we can agree on this,
Hmm.
is that the problem with vanguardism is that what is that we're in a situation where we can no longer afford that level of organization where you have some elite party of people who are in the ideological know of something and they're just telling everybody else to just be warm bodies to move the movement and to get people to do things the way you want them to do it, and I think that the alternative with consensus is the way to go. It's just very hard. It's very uncomfortable. It's very it can be very frustrating for people. It's a very new thing. And it doesn't mean that it's set also in stone in the way that it's done.
Hmm.
The people are trying to figure out. People have gone back and are looking at what best way that they could possibly uh what are the best ways that they could possibly take alternative, you know, means to
Hmm.
continue on with consensus.
Um, I feel like we're moving to the part of the conversation where we discuss how can we really materialize a new society, a socialist society.
Hmm.
How can we make that a reality? Now,
Well, well, the only way that I know of 100% is going to have to be through a revolution, obviously.
yeah, obviously, but it's the
Um,
nature of that revolution. You know,
yeah.
who will? This is where the question. This is where these things come into question, rather. Who will lead that revolution? Who will be the major players in that revolution? And will it actually lead to socialism or a repeat of what happened in the last century? And in my opinion, I feel that if we have competent leadership, not authoritarian as you describes it, but leadership that is coherent, that has a clear structure to it, leadership that can really mobilize the working people into being combative and into fighting for a new society. And if they have the right tactics, they will eventually get rid of this society and establish this social society that we've talked about. You know, but I feel as if that there has to be some sort of driving force. The alternative, like, not just relying on a grouping of people or relying on structures that develop in the heat of battle, that I really don't think that's gonna really produce something out of it. I mean, the best you can get really is without that kind of authoritarian driving force, as we saw in Russia, is the Carnation Revolution in Portugal. There were the had workers' councils in Portugal, but it ended up leading right back to the re-establishment of the Portuguese state. You know,
Yeah, well, while that can happen, you're right. While that can happen, you're right. But I guess it really depends on the situation, and everything is a case by case basis. That's the thing about socialism and moving forward with it and establishing it as a society is that it's all experimental and not every way that you implement it is going to work the way that it theoretically should, um, that's the only thing I could say about that.
hmm
Maybe it's because of my own orientation as an IT professional because I work so heavily in open source.
Right.
You I
I am
have a
familiar with
more
it. I am familiar with
right.
that.
I have a more
You have more of an
what's the
appreciation for the horizontal nature of how things like open source software get produced.
yeah, and you know that you can go back in and work around something, or you don't have to sit there and go, well, this can't be fixed because the code on this is closed. I can't do anything.
Right.
Uh, I need to go back and reinvent the wheel, or whatever. It's just, like you don't have to do that, and so that I feel like you're gonna have to go back in and rearrange your
Mm,
in order to get something to work.
mm,
Force it to or just or rather or give up altogether. And I think that it's all about case by case basis.
hmm.
So
Mhm.
all right,
Let me see.
we're getting into they're coming to the hour. I think that just to let you know. So I think that if we want to move forward, it's going to take a lot. One, I don't think that um, I don't think that it should be a situation where we need to go back to another thing that I think has been plaguing the left so much is sectarianism, where
Mhm.
we are, where we're doing things like not, uh, where we're doing things like we're not, uh, working with each other because we know that, well, this person's a liberal, this person's a Stalinist, this person's an anarchist. I'm not working
Right.
with this. I'm not involved with this. Fuck the
Right.
whole thing. I'm out. Uh,
Right.
I don't know if we can really afford that anymore. This
Hmm.
doesn't mean that we're supposed to forget who we are and what we do. But I do think that if there's something in front of us on the table in terms of how we're supposed to be organized,
Right.
and how we should be organizing around certain issues,
Hmm.
or really all of them at this point. I think that we got to forget about the single issue approach as well. I think all of us are done with that.
Yeah.
But I think the sectarianism has got to be dealt with in a different way now. I'm going to go
Hmm.
right back to the same mistakes of the past
Well,
years.
wouldn't that mean that we would have to like push past them and push past these people? I think that's what's going to eventually end up happening. You're going to end up, if you really want to develop the kind of like you really want to develop the kind of fighting force necessary to get rid of the present society, you're going to have to push past them. And I feel like that's the basis to confront Leninism, to produce a new paradigm, to really push past them, to really come up with something that makes sense, that isn't like what you see in a Leninist style organization, something that really draws in working people and makes them into real combatants, that makes them into real class conscious fighters. You know, that's what we need. And I mean, when we look at what's happening now with the incoming president and his crew of billionaires and extreme rightists, something like that has to happen. Now, all these people that have their different ideological leanings, they can change if the right group of people are there. They can change if the right tactics are present. I think that will kill the sectarianism, in my opinion. An organization that really does what I describe, that is what's going to kill that sectarianism.
Right, right.
I'm reading this comment section, and it seems like we have a whole bunch of people here that do not quite understand what it is we're talking about. They cannot
Yeah,
be
well,
exceptional.
the thing is that I seem to be having a bit of a technical difficulty. I can't, and I can only imagine that the issue would be that I would have to either refresh the page altogether,
Right.
which I guess, but for some strange ass reason, I'm not able to block these dudes' comments, which should not be happening at all. Uh,
They're very offensive and infuriating.
well, here's the thing. Okay, now, no, okay. So here's the thing. I think that we covered some good ground here. Let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and turn a little bit of attention to the chat room right now, since and
They want
only
to
to
be
say
like
a
that.
couple of things. And yeah, and only to say a couple of things between GTFO Simp and Brothers First. Here's a good example of two basement dwellers who are mad at their mothers
Right.
because they were put on this earth.
Right.
And I get that,
You guys hate yourselves, man. You guys
Yeah, they
hate
do.
yourselves.
And I get that. No, 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 Elm City, you didn't do anything bad at all. You're good where you are. You're
And I
good
also
what you're
find it
saying.
I also find it funny that a lot of these guys are coming from you know who that layer that disgusting pit of hell,
Yeah.
virtual hell.
Hold on. Let me just say this one
Didn't
thing.
your
I
leader
want.
get shamed by Vlad TV? Go back to
Oh,
your leader.
Tommy. Yeah, go back to their pimp, Tommy. No, look, I want to give a huge shout out to Elm City right now, and I want to give a huge shout out to Robert J. Powell for at least hanging in with us while we were trying to talk about something. But then, unfortunately, they've been dealing with these two closet cases here in the chat room. GTFO Simp and Brothers First. But let me start with Brothers First and GTFO Simp and say
I want
this.
to take on GTFO
You guys
directly.
hate, yeah,
You
you
go ahead.
guys hate black women because you hate your mothers. And you hate your mothers because they put you on this earth. And you hate the fact that they put you on this earth because you're failures. Both of you are exactly failures. Throughout this entire week, I've been doxing people who are fans of Obsidian. I go to Peace, Robert. I go to Obsidian's videos.
Thank you, Robert.
I've been taking names down. I've been running them through the various how shall I say services that I use, and it's very interesting, Vuk, that a
Hmm.
lot of these guys who constantly obsess over black women the way they do,
Hmm.
constantly call black women failures, are men themselves who are failures. One guy is not even 23 years old. He has two kids in that he abandoned in Michigan. He now lives in the South. Um, I mean, it's unbelievable, and yet these guys constantly obsess over black women the way they do. I do have a video upcoming soon that's going to address also their myth about welfare, because the big myth
Oh yeah,
is that black women have gotten rid of all the black men in the world in their lives for the sake
it's
of
complete bullshit.
welfare, which, yeah, that welfare check that will get you a swimming pool and a mansion. Uh,
Uh-uh. I thought that Bill Clinton destroyed welfare as we knew it and made it into workfare.
Wait, what now? Repeat that again.
I thought Bill Clinton made it into workfare, so that doesn't happen anymore. Where
Right.
are they coming with this bullshit from?
Yeah. Well,
I want to talk a little bit to get the F off Simp.
yeah, go ahead.
I had enough of this guy. This guy says that we're liberals. Dude, we're not liberal,
We're not liberals. And if
right?
you actually open the book, GTFO Simp, you would know the
What's the
difference.
definition of a liberal? I'll tell you what the definition of a socialist is. You degenerate pipsqueak. It's about common ownership of the means of production. No liberal wants that. Liberals want to reform capitalism. What's wrong with you? And you're talking on,
Yep.
man, kiss my ass. Kiss my ass. I had enough of you.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on in this list, man. I cannot get rid of these dudes for some reason. I'm getting an error message. And I didn't really want to have to come out and say that, but I mean, this is the first time I've ever seen this happen. I've had no problem blocking these cocksuckers before in the past, and somehow,
You can kiss
uh,
my ass, you little weirdo. You don't know what the hell
something
these
tells
words
me that I'm
mean.
not going to be. Something tells me it's probably not going to be able to work until.
No, you get the fuck off of here, you degenerate animals.
So look, man, we covered a lot of things.
Hmm.
I wasn't looking to see if we could solve the world's problem.
Right.
Uh,
But it's good. It's good
black
talking to you guys. I'm talking to you again. I mean, and I haven't said anything in quite a while, you know. And now that I have made an appearance, a real appearance, look at that. Oh, you can kiss my ass. Get the fuck, Sim. Get the fuck out, Sim. Your mother. How dare you insult my mother, you animal? I should put you, if you want to be in the gulag, I'm going to make sure that you're going to be the first person on the list of the gulag. That's it. That's it. Oh, yeah? Hmm. It is counterproductive, but unfortunately, these people don't know when to stop.
He
They don't.
said the right and
They don't deserve
others do
freedom of
not
speech.
deserve freedom of
You all
speech.
don't deserve
Oh
freedom of
yeah,
speech.
I did say that, and I stand by that. I'm always
You
going
all
to
don't
say that.
deserve freedom of speech.
See,
Oh,
the
never
thing
say never,
is,
asshole. Right? Never say never.
but okay. So the thing is, you said that we need to push past the liberal element or any other element that might get in the way. I
Right.
think that to some degree, I agree. I think that an organization has to be, or a movement, sorry, has to be transformed in a way that will allow us to do that. But see, that's
Mm,
kind of like not what happens. In other words, if the more revolutionary element within a movement
mm.
begins to actually take over, so far that's never really happened. I mean, there was a lot of there was
Especially
all
here in
kinds
this
of
country.
people who considered themselves revolutionaries at Occupy,
Right.
and they didn't take over Occupy, and they didn't move it or push it forward.
Mm,
And and there could be lot of different reasons why that was the case. But the thing is that I don't. We're not going to be able to push forward until like push past, say, the the elements that keep us held back, i.e., the liberals, unless we actually win uh, taking over certain movements and taking
mm,
over anything for that matter. That's
mm-hmm.
not going to happen. There's definitely a very strong. I think what really plagues the left right now. As I had mentioned, I talked about the academia part, but
Yeah.
really that's all part and parcel of just what it was known as the bourgeois left. I mean,
Right.
that's really what has taken over and has a very strong
Hmm.
influence, even
Oh yeah.
amongst, especially amongst uh, left, people of color who fall on the left. Um, it's so much more easier to do a tweet than it would be to actually go into your community and start organizing.
Right.
Uh, and I think that that's an example of what I mean by the bourgeois left. Uh, Now, granted, I, you know, I was doing that kind of work when I was younger. I get after a certain amount of years, you just you kind of refocus, you do other things. That can happen. I don't really fault people for that.
Hmm.
But what really blows my mind are people who are younger than me, who have far more energy. They don't have kids, and they're just way too comfortable just having bull sessions in dorm rooms and not
Or the
going
internet.
beyond that, or
Or
the
the
internet.
internet. Yep.
How dare I forget that part, or the internet, and not do anything
Anything
beyond
about it. That's the issue. But I just feel as if that what we see here is like what you described. I just feel as if the right people have to be at the head of it. It has to really like that organization. I mean that there needs to be an organization that would bring out the best of these people. So whereas you think that we have to get people out there to start doing activism and then it'll degenerate on its own. I think unfortunately after that, it's not going to happen like that, and it's simply because of the nature of the situation we're in. What we need now is an organize, in my opinion, rather, is an organization that doesn't have the democratic, so-called democratic centralism. It doesn't have that vanguardism nonsense all wrapped up in it, but at the same time, is able to bring out that energy to make people want to be activists, that make people want to do things to bring down the society and to establish a classless society that would make people want to do these things. So, well, I guess that's coming from my orientation, and I guess what you're saying is coming from your orientation, which is not really that different if you look at it. But there are certain things that are obviously in conflict. So we're seeing this thing from two different perspectives. Get the fuck off here, Simp. Go do what your title says. Get the fuck off of here.
I
Oh,
that part of what you just said, and I think with that we're going to go ahead and close it down a little bit. But I do want to say I want to thank I want to thank Robert J. Powell for hanging in with us here, Robert. We're gonna hit on different other. I'll be hitting on different other topics as I have different other guests. I might push the the autonomous dialogues onto Tuesdays instead of Wednesdays because I still want to be able to do food for thoughts on Thursdays, except this week. I'm probably not going to do food for thought tomorrow night because, yes, even for me, past 11 o'clock, 11:30 is kind of late. Unless, of course, Curious wants to lead tomorrow night's food for thought. I would hope that she would want to. But other than that, I'm probably not going to do tomorrow night at all. But
okay.
next week, I want to have Elm City on where we're going to talk about games. We're going to talk about comics and gender, get her thoughts on a lot of the things out there. I want to talk to her about what she thinks about the new Star Wars if she saw it, and what she thinks about a female lead. I've seen lots of videos out there about that particular movie in regards to gender and the idiocy around it. Blows me away. Obsidian, I swear to God, man, I kind of wonder how this guy has the intellectual capacity to even tie his shoe. I mean, I listen to his videos out of
Shit.
pure entertainment, man, especially during my lunch break,
Mhm.
because he doesn't disappoint. By the time lunch break, I'm going to have a video, and that's when I know I'm going to have a laugh.
Hmm.
No, that's the deal there. And that's funny. I just got through looking at Brother's first, his list of his list of subscriptions, and GTFO Simp. I looked at his list of subscriptions, and I'm blown away at
I'm sorry.
I'm completely blown away at the fact that these dudes are of a single mind. Same channels they like. It's the same thing. Obsidian, Tommy. Who's the new black conservative sensation? Anthony something. Another one of these self-hating closet cases like
A
GTFO Simp.
degenerate.
I mean, guys, you're so homophobic, but we all know why you are. Why don't you
because
just
he
come
wants to
out
be
and admit
gay.
it?
I don't mean
Because
to
they are
say
gay.
that. I mean, I don't mean to say it like that. They want to be homosexual. I mean, that's it. You know, that's the
That's
whole
what their
thing. I mean,
problem is. That's
I'm not.
exactly what
I'm not. I mean, you see me discriminating against gay people. I don't need to do that. I know who I am. I don't need to
Yep.
reinforce my discrimination. Reinforce it with discrimination. When you do that too many times, you're gonna have to start to think: is there something wrong here? Am I denying something? Because if you keep on pushing it like that, it makes people outside, other people watching you wonder if maybe you have an inclination towards that, and maybe you should accept what you are and come out of that closet and embrace your inclination. Why do you have to keep calling people homosexuals and use such degenerate homophobic slurs? I will
Well,
deal with
the
you
thing is
losers.
that they
I will deal
insult
with you
the white.
losers. I will deal with you losers very soon, at a time of my choosing. That's it.
In my opinion, they insult gay people. That's how I see it. So I really don't even want to say that about them. GTFO Sim says that they're fighting back. Yeah, right. Black
You
men will
motherfuckers
rise under
ain't
Trump.
fighting back for shit.
Listen to what this coon is saying. Black men will rise under Trump. I mean, dude,
Trump is
you
gonna
are
gentrify all lots of these black communities in the north. You know it. That's what I
exactly.
mean. Come on, man. Even I knew that. Even I knew.
GTFO
Yo,
Simp.
just pay attention, man. When he's talking about renewing the inner cities, he's talking about chasing your black ass out of these communities. Come on, man.
GTFO Simp, are you aware of what Trump's role was during the Central Park 5 case?
He posted a damn advertisement making these poor young men, young black and Hispanic men, look guilty.
Who were innocent. Yep. And they were completely innocent and they were proven to be innocent.
That's it.
And Donald Trump led the
That
charge, the
charge.
racist charge against
I
these
don't know
five
shit,
boys.
dude. You don't know shit. Honestly, you
Okay,
think Trump is
so
gonna
Vu,
lift black man up? Get the fuck out of here, man. Trump is trying to chase your black asses out of all of these damn communities, out of these inner city communities. Come on, man, wake up. He ain't gonna do shit for you.
so so Vuk, I want to thank you for coming on to my first episode of Defragging the Left.
Uh huh.
I think it was a success. I think we talked a lot about we hit on a lot of good things here,
Yeah.
and I will definitely have you on next time in the very near future. I'm
Hmm.
very looking forward to Elm City coming on. I most certainly want to have a talk with Robert J. Powell. He and I need to exchange some emails. I already have like a list of people already that I want to have on the show that I've already spoken to. So,
I'm a real black man, you homophobe.
so it's kind of crazy right now, but I can't believe it, but it looks like that I'm actually going to be booked all the way into March um, with people who've actually said yes. I was actually surprised. I'm working on a few other people as well. So look, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. This was really fun, and we will all be talking to you soon. Thank you so much, Vuk, once again for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Peace, everybody. See you next week.